Okay, this is Kitty Genovese. Kitty Genovese started a lot of social psychological discussion that led to the Piliavin study. It's about helping behaviour because Kitty Genovese was stabbed several times. Lots of people in the neighbourhood heard her, and people didn't go and help. People didn't help out. So this is the background to this study, and Kitty Genovese is the basis for it.
Okay, so from the case of Kitty Genovese, people were shocked about the case, and social psychologists wanted to find out what was going on there. Researchers like Latane and Darley in 1968, they conducted lab experiments, and there was quite a few of these that were done by Latane and Darley, but pretty much experiments where you had participants turning up to research and not actually realising that a lot of the other people there were actors. They were confederates, like in Milgram's study. So, for example, in Latane and Darley's study, this would be similar to the setup where they would be asked to communicate with people via headphones at different desks. And if they had one person who faked an epileptic seizure, say this person collapses. Now, what they found was that if this person believed that some of the other people that she was talking to had heard the victim collapsing but weren't going to help, they wouldn't decide to go and help. If they felt like the people who were on the headphones hadn't realised that this person had collapsed, then they would go and help. Okay, so what does that tell us about bystander behaviour? It tells us that we can become ignorant to a situation. We can decide to ignore it if we think that other people are also ignoring it. And that's known as pluralistic ignorance, and we'll get to that in some key terms. But yeah, if we think that other people are ignoring an emergency, then we're probably also likely to ignore that emergency. Perfect example of that is how often have you been walking down a high street and you see a tramp who is, or a homeless person who is lying in a doorway and is seemingly asleep. They could be seriously ill, but if crowds of people are walking past, then the majority of people don't stop and they keep walking. So, how do we explain that? The cost-reward model of helping is Piliavin's cost-reward model. So the researcher that you're going to look at is their cost-reward model, Piliavin's cost-reward model. So what makes us stop and help this person or ask them if they're okay or if they need something? When someone collapses, so here's a scenario, someone collapses, so there's an emergency situation, that equals arousal, what's known as arousal. Now this isn't a pleasant kind of arousal, this is an unpleasant arousal. Arousal generally just refers to increased heart rate and perspiration and respiration, and generally that kind of sick feeling that you get when something's about to happen, like when you're about to have an exam. That's arousal that you're feeling, and you want to get rid of the arousal. When we see an emergency situation, our bodies naturally want to get rid of negative arousal. And how do we reduce the arousal? We then have to decide, are we going to help or are we not going to help? Because both of these can, like in this situation, not helping, both of these will reduce the arousal. If you walk on by and you don't stop, then you escape the emergency situation, so you get rid of the arousal. And if you stop and help and they're okay, then the arousal goes away. Or if you need to call an ambulance, then eventually the arousal goes away. But which one do we choose, help or don't help? Piliavin's saying that we balance up the costs and the rewards. Okay, so help or don't help, costs and rewards. The kind of costs to helping are the effort, the time, the embarrassment, the risk of harm. Those kind of things are going to put you off from helping. So it'll depend perhaps on the state of the victim, of the person who's collapsed. If they look like they've got blood on them, for example, you might decide there's more risk there to helping. Are they a danger? If you're in a rush, if you're running late for a job interview, are you going to stop and help? Probably not. Costs with not helping, however, is if people are nearby you and are looking at you, why didn't that person just stop and help? You could feel social disapproval, you could damage your own self-esteem, you could feel guilty about it later, blame yourself. So there's costs to not helping as well. The rewards of helping: social approval, praise, self-esteem, and you reduce the arousal. And the rewards of not helping is you protect yourself from potential harm, but you also get to where you're going on time, and you save yourself the time and the effort. Okay, so that's essentially Piliavin's cost-reward model. And when you get to the results of the study, it's essentially looking at whether people would help a person who collapses on the New York subway, and they explain their results in terms of the cost-reward model. So the key concepts to just fill in before the study details is bystander intervention. So pause me after I've explained each of these. Bystander offers help in emergency situations, so simply intervening as a bystander, someone who stands by, intervenes and helps. So a bystander who intervenes is someone who helps. Someone who doesn't, that's known as apathy. Bystander apathy is where you become apathetic to the situation. In other words, you ignore the person's need and you don't intervene. You walk on by. Diffusion of responsibility is the idea that if others are present, then you diffuse the responsibility between the crowd. So the more people there are, the less likely you are to help, is the idea. Okay, so if you're on a bus and it's only you and another person on the bus, and this person collapses, then you're going to feel pretty bad if you don't help. But if you're on a bus with 100 other people crammed in and somebody collapses, the idea is that diffusion of responsibility occurs, that you share the responsibility, and that can lead to pluralistic ignorance, which is people ignoring the fact that there's an emergency situation. Okay, plural meaning more than one. The tendency of people in a group to mislead each other about an emergency situation. So like a person might perceive an emergency as a non-emergency because others are remaining calm. This person collapses, and if the first person next to them just stays pretty cool and doesn't do anything, the others might think, oh well, if he's being pretty cool, then we'll be pretty cool about it. And that's pluralistic ignorance. So there's a slight difference between those two terms: diffusing the responsibility between you and saying, well, it's not my responsibility, it's everybody's, and pluralistic ignorance, where you kind of pick up cues from other people that there isn't a danger. And the cost reward model is what we have explained. So emergency situation, whether you help or not depends on a cost reward analysis.
Okay, so now use your Core Studies 2 guide to take notes on the study detail.